Gentlemen and ladies, a warm welcome to the residents of Denmark. One of the reasons we chose to be on the 76th floor was to be able to have discussions where only the sky is the limit, while at the same time making sure that the topics that we discuss are pushing important agendas. And I think that the agenda that we're going to discuss today could not be more important: how women can grow the economy and implicitly grow themselves. It should not be the case, but even in 2013, we do have inequality, we do have gender inequality, and there are a number of reasons why this should not be the case. The one that we're going to discuss today is the enormous economic potential there is in being better at integrating women in the workplace, in the labor market, and also the ability to have women take high position in society, private as well as public. And to discuss that, we have an incredible panel, an incredible audience. Let me start by introducing Nick Hækkerup, who is the Minister for Trade and European Affairs. He's one of the leading politicians in Denmark. He's been a vice chairman of the Social Democratic Party. He was, in 2000, in the age of 32, the youngest mayor in Denmark and a very pro-business mayor. He's been member of parliament since 2007, Minister for Defense, and he is now Minister for European Affairs and Trade. And he is the fourth generation of a family that has worked for equality in Denmark. And the Hækkerups are the closest that we in Denmark come to the Kennedys and the Clintons. Then we have President Obama's former ambassador to Denmark, Laurie Fulton, who is now a partner in Williams and Connolly. And I would like to acknowledge you, Laurie, for being one of the persons who brought about this idea. We discussed it in lunch in Washington. And then Minister Hækkerup endorsed it in his third day in office, and we were very happy for him to do that, so we could carry this out. Then we have Kay Heimovitz, journalist at Manhattan Institute. We have Eddie Williams, who is the corporate vice president at Novo Nordisk, the largest company in Scandinavia in terms of market cap. We have Deborah McWhinney, COO of Global Enterprise City and co-chair of City Women. Deborah Bottas, who is the vice president of Global Services. And then the excellent moderator, Tony Reinhardt, who is the president of New Women's Club of New York and editor of the Americas Desk at Thomson Reuters. And let me just say that this is what we, well, let me also say that I would like to introduce the whole audience, because we have so many high-ranking people here in the audience. There's no time for that, but please introduce yourself once we get to the Q&A. And finally, before I give the floor to the moderator, this is what we call the Crazy Week in New York, and very busy because of the opening of the UN General Assembly. No one is, of course, more busy than the Secretary General of the UN, Ban Ki-moon. So if you have a meeting with Ban Ki-moon, there's not too much flexibility in the schedule, and that is what the minister has at 9:30. So he will discreetly walk out at 9:30 and 9, and I will discreetly take his place. So a warm welcome to everyone, and I will give the floor to our moderator.
Thank you, sir. I think I'm mic'd. We're good? Yeah, so you may have this back. Thank
Eddie?
You so much. There you go, Eddie.
Oh, wait, I should give it to you. That's actually what I was told.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction of all our panelists. Because the minister is going to discreetly leave us at 9:30 or 9 o'clock, we'll start with you if you don't mind. Will you, sir, please, for our audience, compare and contrast the United States and Denmark in terms of the inclusive workforce? Denmark has a reputation for being extremely progressive, and the United States would like to think that it is a leader in creating an inclusive workplace, but we have our problems, as other countries do. Could you tell us what the differences are, what the similarities are, and what we can learn from each other?
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and take part in this very important discussion. Maybe I could answer that question by quoting a former Nobel Prize winner in economy. He's a Swede, and he said about Denmark. If you want to see a true miracle, then you should look to Denmark. That small country, which almost consists of only fog and land not able to grow anything on, and a country that throughout 200-300 years lost 2/3 of its territory. If you want to see a true miracle, you should look to Denmark. Why has Denmark become one of the richest countries in the world? And I think one explanation to that is exactly that. Being a small country without the large scale of the U.S., without any oil, without any natural resources whatsoever, what has been our path has been to insist on getting the most out of everybody, giving people the possibility to fulfill their potential, not only men but women as well, having free schools so that everybody could get an education, free university where everybody could get an education, which by all means means that we have one of the high share of working women in the OECD. That said, I must say that there's still a lot of things that we'll have to do better. For instance, compared to the U.S., we're not good at getting women in management. The degree of women that take a university degree in Denmark is far larger than the number of men getting a university degree. Nevertheless, only 20% of the leaders in the private sector are women. So and 40% in the public sector. So we have to do something about that. And on the other hand, compared to U.S. as well, Danish women are not very good at creating new businesses. We don't have that entrepreneurship that women in the U.S. have. So I guess we have this need, basically the need to give everybody the possibility to fulfill their potential is what has driven us to have women participated in the workforce at the degree that they do, but there's still a lot that can be better.
What's the plan going forward in terms of Denmark's infrastructure? Any programs that will bring women out of the household into the workforce, into the visible workforce?
Yeah, we have had this. What we're talking a lot about in Denmark at the moment is this work-life balance. How can we have both adults in the family working and still be able to take care of our children and so on? And we have affordable daycare for everyone, where children can attend after being 6 months, and then we have free school. We have after school care. This is some of the things that enable parents to work. And then we have a whole year, 52 weeks of paid parental leave, and then the working week of 37 hours, which is a working week of 37 hours actually is 37 hours and not much more than that, except if you're a minister, then you'll have to work. Yeah, I'm sure. So we try to make it possible to have this work and life balance, which by all means also means that Denmark have one of the highest birth rate for women, 1.8 child per woman, which I think is amongst other things a result of being able to pursue your professional goals and still have children.
So a lot of what you just mentioned deals with infrastructure.
Yeah.
You have programs in place for daycare. You're looking to expand that, educational opportunities, workplace flexibility. How would you translate that into an environment like the United States, where it's such a larger country? What would you do, what would your recommendations be if you wanted to bring that kind of a program here?
This is something that I really hate to do. I hate turning up and trying to give these wise guys answers that you should just do it like that, and then it would work. I think what I can do is tell what we are doing, and I guess then you, with your knowledge of the American society, will have to pick and choose if this is something that you can use or not. So I guess I'm not in a position where I can actually recommend what you should do. That's one point. The other point is it's very strange for me because being a Dane, you always look to the U.S. to see what we should do, and coming from a position being Minister of Defense, you always look to the U.S. to see what you should do. So,
Try not to do it.
yeah, in some cases, yeah. So.
Then let's take it back to Denmark and talk about your time frame. Is this a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, and what's it going to cost?
This has been a long journey, and I guess it really picked up pace in the middle of the 60s, beginning of the 70s, when women entered the labor market, and we had a situation there where just as it was said before, that the ideal aspect of equality, gender equality, was very high on the political agenda, and it became there was almost a consensus in Denmark that we wanted this gender equality, and it started like me and my 3 brothers. When we grew up, our mother said that she was a school teacher, and she didn't want to do all the housekeeping, and especially she didn't want to be the one to cook for us. So we will have to, my father, me, and the 3 others would have to have one day every week where we will have to do the cooking and to buy the merchandise and so on. So it has been. I don't know how to say it, but it has been built slowly into the society that this is what you do. I mean, it's. I've got 2 daughters on my own by now, and it's completely unthinkable that they should ending up with a man that would not do half of what has to be done back home. So that it's throughout these decades, it has been such an integrated part of our perception of what we want and which society we want to have. So not an easy fix, but very strong.
What is the cost of creating this infrastructure?
One of the prices that has been paid and that we have had to deal a lot with it is that we leave our children a lot to be taken care of in daycare, in after-school daycare. And one of the problem there, and that's actually quite interesting, is that almost everybody employed in daycare and after-school care are women. So we are having a discussion at the moment in Denmark if all our young boys growing up and all their role models are women. So do they actually get the way that small kids, small boys react is I know it because I got 2 very physical, and And there is a debate if this being amongst women all the time, that they will have to talk about the things and not being able to fight it out like boys do and so on. So this is one of the debate that we are having back home at the moment. Yeah.
So there's not enough of a balance. They're not being exposed to men enough in their growing stages.
Exactly. How will and I think it's an interesting question. How will a young man be growing up when he all of his life in preschool, in school, in daycare has been surrounded by women all the time? What kind of man is coming out of that?
So there's a social cost. How would you change that?
We are trying to see if we somehow can make it more attractive for men to turn into these kind of careers. But one of the problems is that this is not the most well-paid job. So there is there is a true dilemma here.
Since you mention pay, can we move on to this for a minute? One of the big issues for women the world over is equal pay for equal work. How does that stack up in Denmark?
In principle, we got equal pay for equal work. If you look at it, we don't. If you take the statistic, you can see that women in Denmark are paid less than men in Denmark. In an area where you negotiate your salary by yourself, but a very large part of the Danish labor market are covered by agreement made by the union and labor organization so we have a very large area. For instance, school teachers, for instance, nurses, for instance, people in the military. A lot of our workforce is covered by a general agreement where the salary is fixed and where there is no difference between men and women. But if you have especially women with a university degree or in a higher position who negotiate their own salary, you can see that women get less salary than men do.
Is there something that could be done within your infrastructure to change that, to balance it a little better?
Yeah, I think we have one thing is to talk about it, because once you talk about it and start addressing the problem, a lot of women in Denmark rightly say this is totally unacceptable. We will have to make sure that we get equal pay for the same work.
Is the discussion, the discussion taking place at a high corporate level?
Yeah, it is. In some corporation, it is. Yeah.
May we offer our guests a question with you before you leave?
Yeah.
Could we take a question from you? Does anyone have a question for the minister at this point? Yvonne?
I mean, I'm just wondering aloud about something. There was an article in the New York Times, I think it was yesterday, about people having to have two jobs to live in New York, and actually having two jobs and still being homeless in some cases, and there were what I had thought was a really disturbing line in that article was that these women, in most cases, were employed as bank tellers, daycare, health aides, and security guards. And I was asking myself, what society are we if the security of our building is a really badly paid job, if the health aid that is taking care of our parents is a very low paid job, if the bank teller who is keeping our money is a very low paid job, and I'm hearing that this is not only an American problem, where why is a daycare worker a low paid job?
That's a very good question, but the context is a little bit different in Denmark. I don't know anybody in Denmark who have to have two jobs to provide for themselves or their families. We have a minimum wage that you will have to get paid that ensures, not by law, but by the deals that are made in the labor market, that you will have to get a certain pay. So we don't have this situation where you have to get 2 jobs. But still, we have this situation where for instance, daycare workers get relatively low pay. But I guess compared to what would be low pay in the U.S., their pay will still be quite high. I think the lowest salary per hour would be like $20 or something like that, at least. And if you work 37 hours a week, you can add up and see how much that leaves you with at the end of the month. And in Denmark, we have to pay about 50% in tax, but still, then we don't have to pay for school and don't have to pay very much for daycare and so on. So you can manage, but the problem is that there is not this high prestige in having a job, for instance, being a teacher, doing school care, and this is something that. And I don't know what we are going to do about it, but this is something that we are talking about. How could we change that?
Thank you.
Mila.
Mila Andre, a follow-up on that question. Is that why men will not go into daycare? Is that one of the reasons that they don't get? Well, can Denmark do something about that? To make men take a job like that before they are promoted to something else? I mean, could it be enforced? Or, if you raise the salaries, maybe men will go in it.
That would, no doubt, that would change it. That if we raise the salary, then men probably will.
And you really think that they would?
I really think they would, yeah.
Okay.
I wonder if
Is that so strange, sir?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's very strange. I've not heard of men, working in daycare.
Oh, I have. In Germany, yeah, absolutely. A friend of mine is a midwife.
And you still find it in Denmark. So.
All right. Good luck.
Thank you.
I wonder if the follow-up question to that isn't, why would we raise the salary for a daycare worker to attract men and not raise it for the women who are already working in the field to either attract better educated women or women with a broader set of skills? We would do it to get the men in, but not necessarily to change the composition of the women who are in the field.
You are absolutely right, and I think that the salary is one part of it. The other salary is a part of how is the social prestige in having this job, and there is some kind of link, of course, between salary and social prestige, but there is a lot of other aspects on the social prestige and how we look at it, because we also do have low pay job in Denmark that have big social prestige. For instance, our soldiers that are being sent abroad have social prestige, but do not. They get paid as badly as women in childcare.
Thank you, sir.
Maybe we could use our soldiers there. Yeah.
That wasn't a bad idea. Do we have time for one more question for the minister? Yes? Please. Go ahead.
Okay, Christine Riesberg from Deloitte. Do you think that one of the reasons why corporate Denmark doesn't perhaps want to hire women as much as men could be that long maternity leave that women are given in Denmark? I recently had a daughter myself. I'm part of corporate America.
Yeah.
She is 4 months old,
Yeah.
and I've been working since the day she was born.
Yeah. I'll tell you the secret. The secret is this, and I know this by heart because I was a mayor and had a lot of women employee. You're absolutely right. The women leave the job for about a year, but once she get back and she has the young child, then she's a very stable workforce, and she doesn't look for a new job for the next couple of years because she has her hand full with the job that she has and the baby that she has back home. And in Denmark, we have a situation where almost 1/3 of our employees shift job every year. So it's an advantage that we know that, well, she will be away for a year, but then when she gets back, she will be quite stable. That's one thing. And the other thing is, if you ask some of the companies that are recruiting people, when we are looking for people for leader job, then they say that you can easily find the other one way around. They say that if a man hasn't been take a position as leader before he's 35, he'll never get a position as a leader. If a woman hasn't taken a position as leader when she'll be 35, that doesn't mean that she should not be a leader, because one of the explanations can be that she has been out of the labor force a couple of times, having her own children. So there is some compensation in the market for that absence, if I can use that explanation.
That's interesting. One last question, or are we done?
I think we need to.
Okay. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you very much.
That was wonderful. Thank you, sir. Very good. Thank you. Excellent. Are you going to join us here, please?
I think you should let the other panelists then have the floor.
I saw a lot of note-taking, so I would like to open it to you. Please start wherever you'd like. Would you like to start? I saw some interesting things happening here.
Yeah, so this was a very interesting discussion. So one of the, apart from my day job, I need the microphone. Apart from my day job at Citibank, I am co-chair of City Women. So we have 142,000 women in 120 countries around the world. So we get to talk and listen and lead a lot of women from very, very different cultures. And so this was just a fascinating discussion this morning. And the two things that popped to my mind is something that really surprises me. It's a trend. You know, we talk about the power of women and the economic buying power of women, and how many, you know, right now there's more women billionaires being born, not born, but, you know, happening in China than there are male billionaires. I mean, there's just some enormous sea changes going on. The one that I don't think we have tracked enough is how many young women and older women are actually the primary breadwinners in their families. I was with Sylvia Hewlett yesterday, who's written a book on mentorship, sponsorship. She's kind of defining the space. And I did a speech to 250 women of one of the large corporations in the United States, their top women, and 2/3 of the women were the principal breadwinners. We just did a survey of the women who have left Citi because we want to get a better understanding how we can retain people, and over 70% of the women who left are principal breadwinners. If you look at the Fortune Most Powerful list, if you look at, you know, the list came out this week, the most powerful women in banking and finance, we believe almost 100% of them are the principal breadwinners. And so, you know, when we're having this dialogue about work-life balance, I think we aren't getting the right questions on the table. We aren't getting the questions about how do you make it work when, in fact, there are two probably equally trained people in the household, and by chance, by talent, by economic situations, by the way their companies are growing, one happens to end up on a faster path than the other one. And how do we make sure that that doesn't cause the family unit to have problems, and that we actually nurture those new family units? And honestly, every time I do a question, I bet if I asked women in this room, how many of you are the principal breadwinners in your family, there's going to be a lot of hands that go up. Let's do it. How many of you are the principal breadwinners in your family? You know, I mean, but it's just, you know, honestly, I should say I've seen enough that I shouldn't be surprised, and yet it's amazing and so inspirational to me that our cultures and the young people of the world are creating this balance that no one's telling them how to do. They're just doing it because why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? And so whether it's the education system or who takes care of the kids, you know, those are the issues. So the one thing I want to say, and I hope that we get this discussion, is that to me and to Suni Hartford, who's my co-chair in our City Women's effort, we didn't do this because we wanted to be nice. We didn't want, this isn't about a tea party. It's a business imperative. Companies that have better, more diverse management teams simply do better. The world is changing very quickly. People that have, and it isn't just women and men, it's cultural diversity and age diversity and all the things that really drive it. Sylvia is going to be announcing a study that just came out. This is probably going to be the definitive study right now on the difference in performing companies between if you have an inclusive management team. And it's basically that companies that do have a 70% chance of being leaders in their product area and I think it's 45%, just a minute, let me just look, 45% more likely chance of gaining market share. So, you know, those are two numbers that we always are looking for the economic impact of inclusion and diversity. Now we're starting to get 3-year, 4-year studies that say this isn't a moment in time, this is really the trend of the future. And companies that don't do this will just simply underperform. Have at it. The people that do will overperform, and that's the way the world works.
Would it follow? Kay?
Well, I think there are a few things I'd like to clarify on one of things that came up before with the minister and Tony, a couple of things you said. One is that when we talk about the pay gap, and this is just to sort of clarify our terms, because sometimes in these conversations, I think there are a lot of assumptions that actually, when you look deeper into the numbers, are not true. One is when we talk about the pay gap, and we assume that when we hear every year from the Bureau of Labor Statistics that women are only making 77 cents or 80 cents on the dollar, that is not equal pay. That's not pay for equal work. It's comparing apples and oranges. So the 77-cent number refers to what the Bureau of Labor Statistics calls full-time workers. And in the United States, that means 35 hours and up. So when you actually break down the numbers, what you find is actually women work fewer hours on average than men. I don't know that applies to the women in this room right now, but that is overall the case. And they are also going into very different fields. And even when you break down, a lot of times you'll see studies where they'll say, well, women doctors make much less than male doctors. Well, it's true, but when you break down the subspecialties, you find that women are far more likely to be pediatricians and psychiatrists. Men are far more likely to be cardiologists and surgeons. And yes, cardiologists and surgeons do make more than pediatricians. And we can talk about why that is. I mean, my own feeling is it has to do with market, you know, with the returns to skills and that kind of thing. But we could, you know, the point is that when you hear those numbers, be very, very careful. They don't necessarily, they're not comparing the same jobs and the same workers. They don't take into account the history of the work. They don't take it into account time off for maternity leave and so forth. And that takes me to something that the minister talked about and that somebody, I think you raised about maternity leave. There's a significant amount of research now that suggests that long maternity leave, which is something that a lot of American women would really love to see. And I'm not arguing against it. I just want to caution that, in fact, it is associated with a kind of inadvertent mommy track. So women who take off a year for maternity leave, and again, it's not to say that this is a bad idea, simply to point it out. are less likely to be able to put their all into the workplace. That is just a matter of physics and not biology, actually. So that's one thing. And even the research where they've looked at the countries, and this is particularly true of the Nordic countries, where there are a lot of supports for working women, sometimes has a perverse effect on women's achievement. Because what happens, as I said, is that you create this unintentional mommy track. If there's a long maternity leave, if you have daycare that is, let's say, limited in hours, you're going to have to leave work early. Also, another point to keep in mind that's different in the United States than in Nordic countries is that we have a much smaller public sector than the Nordic countries do, and this is true for Denmark as well. So women in the United States are far less likely to be working in the public sector than working women in the Nordic countries. If you work in the public sector, you're going to probably make less money than if you're working in the private sector. So that explains a lot. I think that explains something of your gender gap that you continue to see, despite obviously egalitarian attitudes in these countries. So there are all kinds of other factors going on that have nothing to do with discrimination, with even the differences between men and women. They have to do with the way the economies are set up. And by the way, the public sector also, large public sectors also inhibit job or business creation, because somebody who is working in the public sector is less likely to go out and start a business. People tend to start businesses in areas where they know. So if they're working, let's say, in social services, and the public sector is very large, they're not going to start their own business. Right.
Can we take this? I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
So I want to leave the floor to the other panelists, but I have to challenge that because basically I think it is very short-sighted to look at the productivity that is lost during the 52 weeks of maternity leave. The economists have proven that there has been greater gains for women entering the workforce than the IT technologies that have been developed, than China and India coming into the economy. So you have to look at this in a long term. And if you lose a lot of women in these positions, you are going to have a loss to the economy. So just a short comment, and then I think we should let the other panelists have a chance.
No, that's a very good point. And actually, I saw you nodding. You run an HR department. And I know just from my own experiences where somebody has gone out on maternity leave, if they're forced back into the workplace because they're the principal breadwinner or because the income is greatly needed in the household, if they're forced back into the workplace in a short period of time, it's the most distracted worker I've ever seen. They have childcare issues, they're worried about the child because it's so young, blah, 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 blah. How do you deal with this? How does an HR department for this multinational company deal with these issues?
Okay, so first of all, good morning, everyone. So the area that I work in is in HR and has been for the last 22 years, but the area that the business I support is our consulting business, which, just think about the makeup of that. Consulting still is a business where you're on client sites for 3-4 days a week, as my colleague there, I'm sure from Deloitte, nodding. So think about those kind of dynamics. I'll just address what does an HR organization do about that. It's actually not the HR organization that does that. It is actually the embedded culture of a company. So the success of IBM and some of our other corporate kind of colleagues out there is because of not the formative HR policies, because policies are policies, but it's around the culture, the organization, the infrastructure, the beliefs that a corporation will bring to bear, and they walk the talk. So I think it's less about the HR organization, it's about the leadership, and I see a few folks kind of nodding in the audience here. If you have that, you do have the missing ingredient. So that would be the short answer.
Yeah, we're going back to infrastructure. Would you like to follow on this?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank y'all Freeze for having this meeting today, and I'd like to thank y'all Freeze and Eddie for being here, because I think it's extremely important that we discuss these issues not just with other women. I mean, I think it's hugely important. Men have a stake in this. Yes, studies have shown for decades, and the studies are getting even better, that there is a correlation between corporate profits and companies that have diverse boards and diverse, management structures. It's the same with countries. Okay, we've seen that. I think, I don't want to tell you how old I am, but I do have 4 grandchildren. And I think women of my generation, and I came of age at the time when we were starting some of the first, when women could actually get credit. I'm that old. We expected things would be different by the times our daughters were in the workforce. And I certainly kept thinking things will be different by the time my granddaughters are in the workforce. I'm not sure how different they will be. I'm a lawyer. I look at the legal profession, and of course I brag. I say, okay, 1/3 of our justices on the Supreme Court, they're women. Elena Kagan was an associate with me at my law firm. She wrote an article in 2007 that sounds very much like today, and she was bemoaning how we haven't seen the same kind of progress we thought we would. You look at the entry level, I'll use law because that's what I know. You look at the women who go to law school, it's somewhere around 45%. You look at the women who are entering law firms, it's in the 40%. You look at women who are partners, it's 20%. So what happens? It's the same in corporations. As you move up the pipeline to get to the top positions, somehow women are not making it. And the percentage of the drop-off is huge at each step. And so I think there are probably personal issues. Do we set our own glass ceilings? I think we probably do. We need, perhaps to look at ourselves if we want to be professionals a little bit differently. But we also need to be in environments like IBM and like many others here where there is a value, where the business understands that there's a value to having that kind of diversity. And I can't claim that my law firm is better than any of the others. But I think it's very important. And I also can talk some about Denmark and the United States. One of the things you should know, the minister was very wise. You cannot take what happens in Denmark and plug it into the United States, or vice versa. They're extremely different systems. Denmark is a small, homogeneous country with a social welfare system. We are huge, not homogeneous, and we don't have a social welfare system. But to speak on the last point about maternity leave, in Denmark, as ambassador, I wanted to meet the women business leaders. I ended up creating a network of the top women business leaders in Denmark who keep asking me to come back. I kept trying to turn it over to them when I left, but but it's interesting that there's not necessarily that kind of network. But as I started meeting with them and talking to them, one of the things they talked about was that this year maternity leave is a problem. If you're career focused and you want to have a family, taking a year out, you come back and there's, supposedly you get your same job back, but let's face it, things are changing. If you have 2 children, that's 2 years out. So there has been an effort, I know, because I read the US excerpts of the Danish news, there has been an effort to try to get, in some Scandinavian countries, including Denmark, to try to get men to be required to take part of that maternity leave as paternity leave. The Danes have given up trying to force it, but I think they're considering some kind of a tax break to men. Norway's tried it. So some of these, I don't know, is that an institutional problem, a personal problem? I mean, we're going to have children, we're going to have families, somebody has to take care of them. So I think some of these issues are going to continue, and it is going to have an effect on us. But we need to focus on, if women really want to succeed in their careers, how can we help them do that?
Yeah, we keep going back to structure and infrastructure. Big thing. Eddie, we didn't forget about you. Yeah. I know you're ready. Go for it, man.
Just this past week, I worked for a Danish company, Novo Nordisk, and we're pretty large here in the United States, and we're a pretty diverse team at the leadership level as well. this past Monday and Tuesday, we had what we call WIN, Women in Novo Nordisk. It's an organization that we've had for about 5-6 years. And in the past, we've had maybe 250, maybe 300 women to attend a 2-day conference with all of the executive leadership. So we better understand and support and so on and so forth. This year, we did something differently. We made sure that 25% of the attendees were men. I mean, that's common sense, because it's the men who needs to understand the brain power that is out there. Let me go back a little bit more. Recently, in a I think a McKinsey report, it talked about the GDP, the country's GDP. And in the 70s, in the United States, the GDP went up quite nicely because of the baby boomers, and more women were going into the workforce at that time. And there's at least two factors that determines how fast an economy will grow. One would be the number of people entering the workforce. And number two is the productivity of the people in the workforce. So how innovative are the employees, and so on and so forth. Then I just read this morning, I saw this morning in the Harvard Business Review. There's about 4 articles that are excellent in there. And they did a survey of almost 8,000 senior leaders across all industries in the U.S. And they went back and they looked at their 360s, all of the 360s. And they looked at 17 different leadership competencies: drives performance, collaborates across boundaries, innovation, etc. And in every one of those leadership competencies, women were at least as good or better than men. Now, I'm not dogging men. What I'm trying to say is, if one way or a couple of ways would be to grow the GDP and help grow the economy, is to increase the number of people in the workforce, and also to make sure those people are more productive, then obviously we're leaving out a lot of brain power if there are a lot of females who are not going into those positions. And we also know that 2/3 of all of the MBAs in the United States are females. But yet when you look at the CEO level, only 3%, as we all know. So my point here is, how can we change that? And one way of changing that is to have more men in the room, so the men can understand what's going on and understand the need for mentorships and the need to recognize the differences. So I'll get off my soapbox.
No, that's good. Eddie mentioned a study. I would like to further this discussion by mentioning this. Booz & Company, which is a global management and consultancy, did a survey which was published late last year. And the results of it are that up to 1 billion, billion women are expected to enter the workplace in the next decade. The report from Booz & Company said the surge in women employees, employers, producers, and entrepreneurs in the next 10 years would improve not only gender equality, but global economic growth. And we're all very much focused on global growth, especially since we've, for the past 2 years, teetered on going back into a global recession. But, they said, their index ranks 128 countries based on how effectively leaders are empowering women as economic agents, looking at factors such as access to education, market participation, and anti-discrimination policies. What has to change? These are emotive issues. So the opinions that came from this survey and the reaction to it were that things have to change on an economic, social, and cultural level. And that, of course, involves politics. How does it change? How should the infrastructure change to get this inclusive discussion and to help women? There is a glass ceiling. There's no doubt about it. And I think that a lot of women encounter it for a number of reasons, not necessarily because they're impeding their own progress. So who would like to start and take this a little further?
I'll take a crack. But I think, Deborah, you probably have a really good insight. So I think that Sheryl Sandberg was very fortunate to have someone like a Larry Summers, be her sponsor early on in her career. The facts are that most women don't have someone that powerful. But if we just break it down into the numbers, we keep talking about the Fortune 500 companies. There are only 500 CEOs in the Fortune 500. There are only, let's say there's 12 or 15 members of the executive committee. There are, let's just say in each one of those companies, yours included, there's probably 50 or 60 people that are really part of the inner top management. So we don't have to change the world to change the number of women sitting at the top. What we have to do, and when I thought you were saying McKinsey's study, McKinsey did another study that was very interesting. They showed that women who were in the C-suite had something happen in the first 10 years of their careers that was a significant accelerator. Someone picked someone out and said, you are quite good. Again, when I do these little random samples, because mostly I just talk to the top talent in companies, it's almost always women will either nod or raise their hand and say, yes, I'm in this room. Somebody actually did that for me. I know somebody did it for me. That's the fact. So I think we have to be realistic about the rising tide lifts all boats versus what can we do that we really look at the super talent and make sure that the super talent is really nurtured and going forward. And that's where the idea of sponsors and really mentoring and supporting not just the women, but the family unit, their husbands, their partners, whatever, so that we actually make sure that the talent rises and that we get them the right training and we get them the right assignments, because you can't be CEO if you do the same thing your whole career. And that's a real problem with women, and certainly at our company, where we have a lot of fabulous women who are 1 inch wide, 7 miles deep. But it's very hard to be a general manager if you don't understand technology and legal and some of the other things. So I think we, as the more mature women, need to be very focused over the next decade of where and how do we move the needle by being very focused on the pure, wonderful talent that's out there and the pure, wonderful husbands and partners that are in those family units, and how do we help them be successful?
Who wants to follow on this?
So I think we probably both represent corporate America in that perspective. One of the things, let's go a couple of quick comments to what you said. It's the identification of talent at a younger part in their career, I think, is one of the nuggets you're trying to bring out. Truly forward-thinking companies, like some of us are represented here today, recognize that you have to pull through talent. And they recognize it not just because you have to pull through women talent. They will put programs and leadership programs together, pipeline identification for men and women, but what they will make sure is that that pipeline is equal. 50% men, 50% women. Let's face it, when we hire people at the entry level, 53%, I believe, are actually women. So what you have to do is mirror that at every level you go up, because just that pipeline leakage is what I called it, where they actually drop out. Forward-thinking companies think about that at a very early part of their career and pull through. But it takes work. And just your other point that it's only a very small number of positions that are leadership positions, we know that the pipeline to feed that has to be 10x to get there. So if you apply analytics and other things and how people drop out, you will eventually get there, but you have to start way back. And it's an investment of 5, 10, 15 years. So that would be that comment.
I think also sponsorship. I think even senior executives need to learn how to be sponsors. And going back to Sheryl Sandberg's book, Lean In, she said, career is not a career ladder; it's a jungle gym. Oftentimes, I don't believe that that sponsors understand the necessity and the power of having those one-on-one conversations and encouraging people to take on other roles, lateral roles, as well as roles going up and down. And I think also the role of a sponsor, and we discussed this quite a bit early this week, is to make sure that once you sponsor an individual, be it a male or female, then your role is to make sure they get exposure to your other colleagues, because one sponsor isn't enough. Because when you get to the C-suite and a decision's being made on an individual, if I'm the sponsor for one person and I'm the only one advocating or sponsoring that person, no one else knows them, then the likelihood of that person being selected is very, 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 very light. So my responsibility as a sponsor is to make sure that I get exposure for that person to other members of the C-suite or the leadership team as well, be it male or female.
That actually brings a very interesting role definition. We've talked about sponsors. We probably will end up talking about coaches. The strongest word I've ever heard, which really has the greatest impact, is advocate. So it's someone who is actually described as will take a risk on you, and will take a risk on you to actually talk about you to others. And I think you've alluded to that you need more than one sponsor. You need mentors, sponsors, advocates, coaches, managers. You need a broad network. And it's really getting out there with the word that you need that broad network of all those people to help you. So I think that would be it.
Totally agree.
Yes, and where do we find them? Okay, I've already had that benefit, but there's a lot of people in this room, and I sat next to a young woman at dinner last night, and she's doing very well, but it's sort of like, how do you find them? So we're lucky if we have somebody like Eddie, who is going to be out there looking for us, but for a lot of young women, we have to. And when I said something, we have our own glass ceilings, I think sometimes we this is true for me, so I'll just speak personally. We think we're going to get the credit we deserve.
It's a very female trait.
And what I've been very slow to understand is there's nobody out there really looking for my career advancement. I have to be doing that. So where do we find them?
Could we open this? You had a question, Yvonne?
Yeah, I was just commenting on what you just said, and I couldn't agree with you more. Where we find them, it's us. We need to be out there and help women and be the advocates or be the coach or be the mentor, and on the other side, we also need to ask for it. We need to be actively out there and build a network around us. And those of us who have a powerful position, we need to offer it. We need to look around us and see, I always say, what happens if I get hit by a bus? Somebody's got to take over, and we need to start that early. And it's not necessarily my position directly, but it's like, if you care about the organization, there's somebody coming after you, and wouldn't you want to have someone really talented and start helping them towards that path?
Do we have any questions here?
Maybe not a question, but just a comment, Laurie. I thought it was really interesting. You said you came to Denmark and found that you were the ones who started up a group of women executives and so on. Why wasn't there a network like that to begin with? And I think that's very, very, very precisely put, because and coming back to the comments before about creating those networks, it's really up to ourselves to do that, because nobody's going to create networks for women unless they really have an incentive themselves to be part of a network like that. But perhaps going back a little bit to some of the discussions from previous comments, I think that when I find myself in groups like this of women, there's a tendency of perhaps a little bit people feeling victimized, and I really would like to get away from that, and instead look at what can we learn? Why is it that women are not successful? What it is that men do so much better that brings them in the positions where they can get executive jobs And I think that what women can learn is a little bit of the camaraderie that you see among men. Women are really horrible at. And through my career, I found that the people that I would lean on would be men, because I wouldn't be expecting any support from other women. Because if you're on a career track and you're a woman, you have a tendency to very much look after yourself, but not be very friendly, perhaps, to competitors among other women. And I think we need to change that. We really need to build networks where we are, comfortable building relations to other women and being ready to support other women.
Yes, please, go ahead. If you just hand the microphone back. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Heidi Revis. I'm an attorney. I just want to make a couple points. First of all, I think this entire dialogue needs to be infused with an appreciation of the role of technology, because at least I see in my field, which is law, and also in some other professions, technology has released women to not necessarily work out of the workforce. In the legal profession, for example, there are many law firms now that have a work from anywhere policy, and that's had a profound impact on the women in that particular profession. To some of the points about the women being victimized, I happen to do a fair amount of work in banking, and I would say an issue we encounter all the time is really profound stereotypes that start very, very early when you're dealing with a colleague who's, in her mid-20s or late 20s, gets engaged, the ring shows up, and the career path changes. If she's open for a profession, for a promotion, and someone has two people to promote, the thought process is, why should I promote her? She's engaged, she's going to get married, she's going to have a kid, then a second kid. These kinds of stereotypes, I think, need to be addressed from the bottom up. I call it myself the high-low. Programs that are very inclusive in terms of sensitivity training, discrimination training, and really taking that seriously, so that peers and middle managers don't necessarily, repeat that stereotype. On the high side, as a global environment that we have in New York, we also have a penalty of diversity, which is that we have a lot of senior executives coming here from abroad who come from cultures where women are not necessarily 50-50 equals. So, I think the imperative is for companies such as Citi and IBM, et cetera, to really see that, at least in the United States, in a sense, the penalty of diversity is you have to be more proactive, because you're going to have a multicultural workforce, which we all really see as an inherent benefit. But by being multicultural, not as much like Denmark or Sweden, which are more homogeneous, you're going to just have challenges. And if you're not on it every day and every week, those are just going to be sort of inherently perpetuated.
Questions, comments?
Can I just make a comment to that? Do you mind?
Sure.
So one of the things that we have tried to do is get facts on the table, because there's a lot of urban myths about what women think and where women go. And one of the things that we have done is really go back and say, where are the women who have left Citibank? And again, that's my responsibility, is Citibank. So, but where are the women that have left Citibank, both at the, after our analyst program and then as they go into the director and MD level? Here's what's interesting. We can find them now because they're all on LinkedIn or Facebook. So with the exception of like two people that might have moved back to China or something and don't have access to those wonderful tools, they're all working. So women are leaving big corporate America, but are finding really great jobs, and their titles would suggest with broader management opportunities and more leadership roles. I mean, we lost Michelle Peluso, was head of our consumer marketing, to Gelt. That isn't a loss. Michelle's CEO of Gelt, for God's sake. That's a great thing for Michelle. And there's several other people. Interestingly, when we did this survey, 50% of the women strongly disagreed. Now, that's a big statement. 50% strongly disagreed that work-life balance was the reason they left the company. It was really about opportunity elsewhere that just appeared to them to be better than the opportunity inside. 100% are working for our competitors or in some field, a client or something, but 100% are working. So, you know, I think that these myths about what women are doing when they leave and that they're taking all these different paths or they're staying home and playing tennis are really not what's really happening. And that's why I keep saying we need to get facts on the table, because if I want to not be CEO of Citibank, but I want to do what I do and be on the Caltech board and do something for the Defense Department and, you know, do the things I do, I am a super happy individual. And so when you say a negative, and I think you're right, you know, let's not have a pity party about women are, because look, we've got an ambassador in our presence. Do you think that you're, you know, because you aren't the managing partner of your firm that you're not successful? No, look at your rich background, what you've done. And Deborah, you know, all of us have the same thing. So let's remember that we can have it all. We just have my it is different than your it is different as your it, and respect what it is that we do and champion that as encouraging our daughters and our friends to say, do it your way. This isn't a dress rehearsal, everyone. Do it your way.
Okay.
Oh, I don't have too much to add. I always feel at a disadvantage in these talks because I sit in a little tiny room all day long looking at a computer, never talk to anybody. So it creates a very, very different sense of the world, which takes me to just a minor point about the technology issue. I completely agree. I think that technology is changing things enormously for women and men. It's one of the reasons that we're able to talk so much more about flex time, because flex time is possible in a way that it never was before. Completely agree. A couple of cautions about technology that you probably have already figured out. One is there is still the issue of teamwork, of face-to-face. And as you most of you probably know, Marissa Mayer, one of the first things she did was to get rid of telecommuting. I was interested to see an interview with Anne Marie Slaughter just the other day where she said, well, she did the right thing for her company. So, you know, whether in the long run she needs to keep it that way, I don't know. But it's just a minor point. The other thing, you know, again, that I think probably all of you know is that technology also has a tendency to enlarge the work week for us in ways that we just can't control, and this is true for even those of us who do sit in a small room all day long with a computer in front of me. I mean, I often say to people, I don't know when I'm not working, or I don't know when I'm working and when I'm not working, because so much of what I do is absorbing information, and that's whether I'm here or reading the newspaper or whatever, and I assume that's true for an awful lot of people.
Should we take one final question, because we're going to have to wrap it up? I guess I don't need a microphone. I'm Ann Wozencraft. I work at Aon now. I've been there for about 8 years, but in my former life, I was a journalist. So I covered these issues for the New York Times, and I'm very curious because now I've gone from what we used to call the pink-collar profession, because so many of the people entering journalism are women. And yet, most of our media companies, I would say all of the major ones, are run by men. So there hasn't been a great there aren't a lot of women in media. But I'm very curious, because you've touched on this issue but not commented on it directly. If you could comment on what we call the opt-out revolution, and now there was another article that just came out about opting in. So for whatever reason, there are many, many women who are taking a step back, and now they want to get back in. It's very difficult once you've stepped out. So I wonder if you could comment about that, because
maybe
a couple of issues.
One short answer, and then
Yeah.
we'll have to finish.
Eddie, Deborah.
I've got some data on that.
Yeah, you have a lot of data.
If that interests you. It's interesting. I mean, this crowd is not representative of most women in this country. You probably won't be surprised to hear. I think the whole opting out, opting in, women working, women not working is a little misleading, because really what we're seeing is a tremendous amount of fluidity of women working full time, taking a little time off, going part-time or starting a business at home, and that's that invisible workforce that Tony that you've talked about. But this is an important caution to a lot of what we're talking about here. When you ask women, this is the Pew Research Company that's looked into this, when you ask women what would be your ideal arrangement, the most popular choice is part-time. All right? Part-time work. That is the most popular choice. Most women want to work. Most women are working. You know, about 70% of mothers in the United States, which is pretty high, given that you know, we don't have the kinds of supports that other countries have. But if you ask them, they will say they'd really rather have part-time.
So, yeah, sure.
I want to ask Kay. So what would men say?
They don't say part-time.
What do they say?
They say they want to work full-time.
Okay.
80 hours. All right, gentlemen and ladies, so we need to stop, and for a number of reasons, and one is that you're all in such high positions that you need to rush back to your job. I would like to thank a couple of people that I forgot in my opening remarks. Yvonne from the European American Chamber of Commerce that we are co-organizing this event with. Thank you so much for the partnership. We really appreciate it. I would also like to thank my fantastic team at the consulate who has been working for many weeks to prepare this, not least Ulla Dubgaard standing over there, our head of press and communication. And then I would really, once again, like to really thank our great moderator, Tony, and our fantastic panel. And I think you brought about, you know, you nailed it, you put on the spot that there is this huge economic potential in bringing more women into the workforce, and secondly, in having more women in management. And there is this very strong business case for having more women in management. I've experienced it myself in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It used to be a very male-dominated organization, and it has been marvelous to get a number of women in leading positions, and it's just a different discussion. It will, and there are studies that shows this, as you said, that it will, you know, increase the bottom line of companies, and then we can discuss what can society do, and so certainly society can do something. Great companies, like a number of the companies that are represented here, can do a lot to support it. Each individual needs to do and make their choices, definitely, and then in general, of course, the support of the partners you also mentioned. So thank you all for coming, and if you do have time for a little networking, there's still a few bagels and coffee over there. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you. Well done.